Welcome to webinar 5. This webinar is a part of a project funded by the European Union Seabridge program. So today we will talk about Cbam and its effects on the composite industry. So we know that in the recent years, environmental sustainability has become one of the most important agenda items of global trade in industry. So in this direction, innovative policies aimed at reducing carbon emissions, encourage companies and countries to adopt more environmental friendly approaches in their production processes. So that's why the European Union has developed the carbon border uh, adjustment mechanism, CBAM, in brief, for this purpose. So CBAM imposes an additional cost on the import of carbon intensive materials as a mechanism that aims not only reduce negative environmental impacts, but also to balance the carbon footprint of the global trade. Since the composite industry is a sector generally associated with the high energy consumption and carbon emissions, the effects of CBAM on the sector will be significant. So while this mechanism creates new opportunities to reduce the carbon footprint in the sector, it will also be an important test for companies to remain competitive in the global market. So what is CBAM? CBAM is a regulation developed by the European Union to reduce carbon emissions in line with global trade. So this mechanism proposed within the scope of the European Green Deal in 2021 can be defined as an application that brings carbon emission offset for imports from outside the US. So the EU, European Union, aims to achieve its carbon emission reduction targets while at the same time preserving the competitiveness of the local industry. CBAM functions as a tax or regulation to be implemented, especially for imports from carbon intensive industries. Um, So CBAM imposes an additional cost on products imported to the EU based on carbon emissions. So that burden is determined by the carbon intensity of the country where the product is produced and how much carbon is released during the production process. So the operation of CBAM can be summarized as follows. So importers carbon emission reporting. That's the first step. So importing companies report the carbon emissions generated during the production process for each product they import to US. Second step, emission tax application. So certain tax is applied to imported products according to according to the amount of carbon released during production. And the other step is CBAM works in harmony with the EU foreign trade policies, with the aim of balancing global trade with carbon pricing, especially in carbon-intensive sectors such as steel, cement, and chemicals. So CBAM impacts on the European Union and global trade. So European Union carbon emission reduction targets, the EU aims to be carbon neutral by 2050. So CBAM aims to reduce the global carbon footprint by monitoring carbon intensive production processes in the countries outside the US. The other possible impact is impacts on global trade. So CBAM is reshaping the environmental dimension of trade. Countries outside the US will have to offset the carbon emissions in their production processes when offering their products to the EU market. Another possible impact is the competitive opportunities and challenges. So for manufacturers outside the EU, CBAM implementations can lead to increased costs. However, this also creates an incentive to produce more sustainability. So, what are the targeted environmental benefits with the CBAM? So, one benefit or one target is global reduction of carbon emissions. So, CBAM will help reduce carbon emissions worldwide by regulating the impact of foreign trade on carbon emission. The other target is creating a fair balance for carbon emissions. CBAM may become more expensive for local manufacturers due to stricter regulations on carbon emissions. However, carbon-intensive production processes also become expensive for manufacturers outside of US. So that will help to price carbon emissions more fairly both within the European Union and globally. Another target is to promote sustainable production. So it encourages, CBAM encourages manufacturers to switch to sustainable production processes. Uh, Another one is combating climate change. So using CBAM, the European Union aims to make a significant contribution to fighting global climate change. So that mechanism can help industries around the world take more serious steps to limit their carbon emissions. So CBAM and its relationship with the European Green Deal. So European Green Deal is a comprehensive policy set. So that deal proposes a wide range of reforms from reducing carbon emissions to protecting biodiversity, from clean energy transition to circular economy in order to achieve environmentally friendly and sustainable economic growth. So CBAM is an important part of the European Green Deal and is a tool that aims to support the EU's environmentally friendly goals on the global scale. So, what are the basic principles and targets of the European Green Deal? So, one is carbon neutrality. The EU aims to become a carbon neutral continent by 2050. The other one is clean energy transition. Again, EU aims to transition to an energy system based on renewable energy sources as much as possible. Circular economy is a principle that is aimed by EU to adopt the circular economy approach to minimize waste and use available resources efficiently. Protection of natural resources. So it's aimed to protect biodiversity and promote the sustainable use of natural resources. Green jobs and employment. EU plans to create new jobs and make the economy more sustainable within the green transformation processes. So that's why the CBAM should be integrated within the European Green Deal. So the integration of CBAM with the European Green Deal is an important step for the EU to achieve its environmental goals. So that can be achieved by reconciling carbon emissions into external trade or promoting sustainable production and innovation with some regulations. And also carbon pricing and competitiveness will be an important parameter in this integration. So integrating the carbon footprint with commercial strategies will enable companies to adopt sustainable production methods, invest in innovative technologies, and gain competitive advantages. So sustainable production and competitive advantages will be an important part of the EU policies to encourage products that reduce their carbon footprint to become more competitive. Uh, Green certificates also will be an important part of the process. So consumers are increasingly demanding environmentally friendly and sustainable products. So in this part, green certificates will be crucial. New markets and collaborations. So CBAM can also affect trade relations with countries outside the EU. So countries that produce environmentally friendly products can gain more opportunities in the EU market because of the regulations. And in this part, carbon monitoring in supply chains will be important. Companies can strengthen carbon monitoring practices in their supply chains to comply with uh, CBAM. So, what is the effects of CBAM? What are the possible effects of CBAM on the composite industry? So, the CBAM mechanism aims to help the EU achieve its carbon neutrality targets and balance the environmental impacts of the foreign trade. So, the composite industry is one of the sectors directly affected or possibly directly affected by the regulation because composite material production is an important sector in terms of carbon emissions as the production of these products usually involves energy-intensive processes. The effects of CBAM on the composite industry may change the production process, trade relations, environmental strategies in the sector. So the production processes of these materials generally have high energy requirements and are an important source of carbon emissions. So in the production of these materials, some processes used in the production of composite materials, especially those requiring high temperatures and pressures, consume large amounts of energy. That energy requirement is usually met by fossil fuels, resulting in high carbon emission. Uh, Another process that takes high energy in the composite material production is carbon fiber production and resin production. So CBAM will add additional cost to products associated with these carbon emissions, and this cost will have a significant economic impact, especially for manufacturers outside of the US. So since the composite material are in demand in Europe and in the world, this situation may affect the impacts of CBAM on the composite industry. So that might increase import cost because of the increased cost in the manufacturing, export competition and market access, for example, would be an important. And also at the same time, new market opportunities and trade balance could be achieved. So there are some steps the composite industry should take. Uh, since it's an important mechanism, trade strategies and sustainability goals could be changed. The steps the composite industry should take to comply with CBAM with some uh, changes. That could be transition to sustainable production methods. So composite manufacturers may need to invest in low carbon production processes. Uh, Carbon footprint monitoring and reporting will be an important part of the process. Innovation and technology investment to meet the low carbon emission production targets will be an important part. Compliance with the policies and regulations and also supply chain collaborations would be important steps for the composite industry. So CBAM will encourage the composite industry to achieve its environmental sustainability goals and will also lead to significant changes in the production processes in the sector. Composite manufacturers taking steps to reduce carbon emissions and offset environmental impacts can increase their competitiveness within the and outside the US and create new trade opportunities at the same time. So, composites industry must adopt certain strategies to reduce its carbon footprint and achieve its sustainability goals while facing the effects of this mechanism. The steps to be taken to comply with Cbam include both the transformation of production processes and the optimization of the supply chain. These strategies are critical for composite manufacturers to remain competitive in global trade and to achieve their environmental sustainability goals. So carbon footprint reduction strategies can be implemented uh, with some methods. Adaptation of energy efficient production methods is one of them. Use of renewable energy, use of low carbon materials, so materials that cause high emissions, low emissions instead of high emissions. Uh, and also carbon footprint monitoring and reporting will be important step all the time in the process. So, beside many challenges with the transformation to sustainable production system, that mechanism, CBAM mechanism, it brings also some opportunities to the industry. So it has a potential to create significant transformation in the global trade, for example. That mechanism, which presents both opportunities and challenges, will be especially effective for industries with production processes sensitive to carbon emissions. So CBAM may change the dynamics of the global trade. With the new regulations it introduce to control carbon emissions. An important feature of global trade is that trade is largely based on cost and efficiency, and at the same time, carbon limits may increase the production cost of the countries, especially those operating in emission-intensive industries. So production costs, new trade barriers, the rise of green trade could be important parameters in this processes. So with all of this, the CBAM will continue to develop in the future as an important regulation that makes carbon border adjustment as a part of the global trade. The composite industry should focus on innovation opportunities to adapt and the benefit from these new regulations. So CBAM may evolve over time as a mechanism established with the with the goal of limiting carbon uh, emissions. So those future development possibilities may include a more inclusive CBAM structure, stricter emission standards and monitoring mechanisms, development of international corporations, new directions for investors, for example. And if we look forward in the sector, strategies to be followed in the composite industry to meet the CBAM regulation will help companies economically and also environmentally. So companies should uh, improve their sustainable manufacturing eco-design capabilities. For example, composites manufacturers can comply with CBAM regulations by basing their production processes on sustainability principles from beginning to end. So that starts with the eco design. And also companies in the composite industry can innovate new supply chain methods. So develop a more sustainable solution in the supply chain can mitigate the effects of CBAM. So working with suppliers to monitor and report their carbon emissions can help manufacturers reduce their carbon footprint. Uh, at the same time, advanced technologies and research development will be an important. So innovation in the composite industry involves new technology and material development. So investment in investment in R&D activities will provide innovative solutions that reduce carbon emissions, allowing companies to gain competitive advantage in the CBAM compliance product process. So the future of CBAM will strengthen the integration of carbon emission and trade and promote environmental sustainability. So in the process, the composite industry will focus on developing innovative technologies, transforming production processes, and remaining competitive in global trade. Innovative strategies and R&D investment will accelerate the process of CBAM adoption and further increase opportunities in the sector. This transformation will move the sector towards a more sustainable future and positively shape the long-term impacts of CBAM. Thank you so much for joining the webinar.